the call came at 1:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'd been awake, sitting on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet and a cup of chamomile tea gone cold in my hands, doing what I always do when I can't sleep, replaying every decision that led me to this particular kitchen, this particular apartment, this particular version of my life. When my phone lit up and I saw my mother's cern, it was, "Here we go." I let it ring 4 times before I picked up. "Your brother needs you." No hello, no sorry it's so late, just that. I set down the tea. What happened? She was crying, that particular kind of crying she does where you can tell she's been at it for a while, the kind that's moved past sobbing into something flatter and more exhausted. "He's been arrested. Possession charges and they're saying intent to distribute. The bail is $60,000 and we can't." Her voice broke. "You're a financial analyst. You have savings. We need you to help us." I sat there on my kitchen floor for a long moment, listening to my mother cry over the son she'd spent 30 years making sure I understood was more important than me. "I'll call you in the morning," I said, and hung up. I didn't sleep after that. I just sat there thinking about how long it had been since I'd heard her voice sound that desperate when she was talking to me, and realized she never had. Not once, not even close. I need to back up because none of this makes sense without context. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in a mid-sized city in Ohio, the oldest of 2 kids, and from the time I was about 8 years old I understood. Not in a way anyone ever said out loud, but in that bone-deep way children understand things that adults think they're hiding, that my brother was the one who mattered. He came along when I was 6. My parents had wanted a son, not to me but to his brother, at a family cookout when he thought I was too busy eating to listen. Always wanted a boy, now we've got one. I was 7. I remember looking down at my hot dog and thinking very clearly, what am I then? My brother, I'll call him by the nickname our family used, which was Ace, short for his middle name, was charming and funny and chronically irresponsible in the way that certain people manage to make look effortless. He broke things and people made excuses. He failed classes and my parents hired tutors. He got into a fight his junior year of high school that should have gotten him expelled. And my father drove to the school and sat in the principal's office for 2 hours until it became suspension instead. I, meanwhile, got a scholarship to Ohio State. Full ride, academic merit. My parents came to my acceptance celebration dinner. The one I planned and paid for myself because I was 17 and already understood that no one else was going to. And my dad spent most of it on his phone. And my mother talked about how Ace was thinking about maybe looking into community college. Not about me. About him. On my night, I graduated with a degree in finance, got a job at an accounting firm in Columbus, and spent the next several years building a life that was entirely deliberately self-constructed. I had friends I'd chosen, an apartment I'd furnished piece by piece, a savings account that I treated with the reverence other people reserve for religion, because I had learned early that no safety net was coming for me and I'd better build my own. I met someone during this time, a man I'll call my ex, because that's what he is now, and we dated for 3 years. He was good to me in the ways that matter initially, and less good in the ways that matter eventually, and I don't want to spend too much time on him here because he's not the main story. What matters is that when we broke up, I handled it. Cried in my car, took a week off, called my best friend at midnight from a parking lot outside a Walgreens. I handled it the way I handle everything, alone and then fine. My family didn't know we broke up for 2 months, because I hadn't talked to them in 2 months. That wasn't unusual. We had a relationship of obligatory holidays and occasional check-ins, where my mother would say you work too much, and my father would ask if I was seeing anyone and Ace would not call at all, because Ace never called. The last real conversation I'd had with my mother before that 1:47 a.m. phone call had been 14 months earlier. She'd called me during what she described as a family emergency, which turned out to be that Ace had crashed his car, his second car, the one my parents bought him after the first one, and needed money to cover the deductible. My parents had already covered most of it, but they were short $400, and would I help? I asked, carefully, why they were short. My mother said they'd lent Ace money the previous month for rent. I asked why Ace couldn't cover his own rent. My mother's voice went cool in that specific way it does when she thinks I'm being difficult. He's going through a hard time. What hard time? Silence. Then, he just is. You wouldn't understand, you've never had to struggle, that sentence. I've never had to struggle. I want to sit with that for a second, because I think about it more than I probably should. I've never had to struggle, as spoken by the woman who did not come to my college graduation because Ace had a baseball tournament that weekend. As spoken by the woman who, when I called her crying after my first major breakup at 23, said, well, you knew it wasn't serious. As spoken by the woman who has never once, not once in my adult life, asked me how I was doing and waited for the real answer. I said no to the $400. I said it as calmly as I could, which wasn't very calmly. I said that I loved her, but I wasn't going to keep contributing to a pattern where Ace's consequences got distributed to everyone else. And she said something that I'm not going to repeat here, and I said I had to go, and I hung up. She didn't call back. Neither did my dad. 14 months of silence. And then 1:47 in the morning. I didn't call back the next morning. I know that's what people expect, that you'd call back, you'd be the bigger person, you'd at least get the information. But I sat with my cold tea and I thought about the last 14 months, which had been genuinely some of the better months of my life. I had gotten a promotion, I'd started running again. I'd redecorated my apartment with furniture I actually liked instead of the mismatched hand-me-downs I'd been telling myself had character. I'd built something quiet and stable and mine. And I thought about what would happen if I called back. I knew exactly what would happen. My mother would tell me about bail. My father, if he got on the phone, would talk around the subject in that way he has, where he never actually asks directly, just implies until you feel guilty enough to offer. Ace, from wherever he was, jail, probably, some holding facility, would eventually call and be charming and funny and say, "Come on, you know I'd do it for you," which we both knew was not true but which he believed, I think, in the specific way that people who've never been tested believe things about themselves. I thought about all of it. And then I got dressed, went to the gym, came home, made coffee, and went to work. My mother called 3 more times that day. My father called once, which was notable because my father almost never calls. Ace called from a number I didn't recognize, which I figured out only later. I let them all go to voicemail, and at the end of the day I sat down and listened. "My mother, please call us back, this is serious. He needs a real lawyer, not a public defender. Please, my mother again. I don't understand why you're doing this. We're a family." My mother a third time, and this one was different. Quieter, less crying, more controlled, which meant she'd moved into the phase where she was trying to appeal to logic. "You have the money. We know you do. You've always been responsible, that's the thing about you. You've always been the responsible one. We're just asking for a loan, we'll pay you back, my father. Your mother is very upset, I think you should call." "Ace, hey, it's me, look, I know things have been weird between us. I know, okay, but I need you right now. You're my sister, that means something. Call me back." I listened to all of them sitting at my kitchen table, with the last of the evening light coming through the window. And I thought about what that means something meant, coming from someone who had not called me for 14 months. Who had not called me on my last birthday. Who had not called me when I was in the hospital with appendicitis 3 years ago, and my mother had mentioned it to him and he had said, "Tell her. I hope she feels better," and not picked up the phone. I thought about what family meant to them, as a concept. How it seemed to be a thing they invoked specifically when they needed something, a trump card they played in moments of emergency, and then folded back into their pockets until the next time. I didn't call back that night either. I called a lawyer friend of mine the next morning, a woman I'd known since college, sharp and no nonsense, someone who would give me a straight answer. I asked her, not for advice on whether to help my family, but for information. What did possession with intent to distribute mean, realistically? What was the likely outcome? What did bail of $60,000 indicate about the severity of the charges? She was quiet for a moment after I explained the situation. Then she said, "That's not a minor charge. Depending on the amount and what they find, he could be looking at significant time. Your family should be focused on getting a qualified criminal defense attorney, not on making bail. They want me to help with bail." Another pause, that's their choice. What do you want to do? I'd been asking myself that question for 3 days. What do you want to do? It seemed like such a strange question in the context of family, where what you want has never really been the relevant variable. What did I want? I wanted my mother to have called me 14 months ago just to say she was sorry. I wanted my father to have shown up at one of the many things I'd invited him to over the years. I wanted Ace to be a different person, or at least a person who occasionally remembered I existed when he didn't need anything. I wanted the version of family that had been dangled in front of me my whole life as a concept. The thing I was always supposed to perform and sacrifice for and come running back to have been a family that actually functioned. I didn't have that family. I had the one I had. I called my mother. She picked up on the first ring. "I'm not going to help with bail," I said. I'd rehearsed this. I'd written it down actually the night before, because I knew that the moment I heard her voice I would want to soften it, hedge it, make it conditional. So I said it first, immediately, before anything else. Silence. "Mom, I'm not going to help with bail. I want to tell you why, and then I want you to just listen before you respond." "Can you do that?" she said very quietly. Okay. And so I told her. Not in a screaming way, not in a tearful way, in the way I'd practiced, which was flat and clear and as fair as I could manage. I told her about the cookout when I was 7. I told her about my graduation dinner. I told her about the appendicitis and the birthday and the 14 months of silence and the $400 I'd said no to and the way she'd responded and what I'd done with the time since. How I'd tried to build something that felt like a life actually wanted, and how, for the first time in my memory, I'd mostly succeeded. I told her that I loved her and my father, that I even, in some frustrated, helpless way, loved Ace. But that love wasn't the same as a blank check. Love was not the same as being available for every crisis while being invisible for every ordinary moment. You told me I've never had to struggle, I said. I want you to think about what it means that you believe that. Because I have been struggling my entire life, Mom. Just not in ways that anyone in this family ever noticed because you weren't looking. The silence on the other end of the line was different from the others. Not cold, not defensive, just quiet. I didn't know you felt that way, she finally said. I know. I'm sorry that you. I didn't mean to make you feel. I know, I said again, but I need you to understand that I've needed things from this family too. For a long time. And the answer was always no, or silence, or he's going through a hard time. I'm not saying that to punish you. I'm saying it so that when I tell you I'm not going to help right now, you understand it isn't cruelty, it's just fairness. Finally, she cried. I stayed on the phone. I didn't try to fix it. Before we hung up, she said, get him a good public defender and let him take responsibility for his own choices. I said, for once, let him figure it out. That wasn't the end of it, of course. These things are never clean. My father called 2 days later. He was more direct than my mother, which surprised me. My father has always operated through implication and deflection. But this time he said, plainly, I think you're being too hard on us. And I said, I think you waited 30 years to call me and tell me what you think about how I handle things. And it happened to be when you needed money. He didn't have a response to that. My aunt, my mother's sister, reached out by text, a long one, 3 paragraphs about family and loyalty and how I would regret this someday. I read it, typed out a response explaining my perspective in measured terms, then deleted it and wrote instead, I appreciate you sharing this. I'm not going to change my mind. Send. Ace wrote me a letter from jail, which I have to admit I did not expect. It was 2 pages, and it was a mess. Misspellings, crossed out words, the handwriting of someone who doesn't write by hand very often. In it he said that he knew he hadn't been a good brother. He said he'd been thinking about that a lot, in the particular way you think about things when you have nothing but time. He didn't ask me for anything. He just said he was sorry, and that he hoped I was okay, and that he didn't blame me. I read that letter 4 times. I cried a little, which I hadn't done this whole time, not once. I'd been so careful to stay in the calm, rational place where I could function. But something about his handwriting, the crossed-out words, the way he said I don't blame you like it was something he'd actually considered, the possibility that it might be a choice rather than an obvious default. Something about that broke through. I wrote him back. Not a long letter. Just, I got your letter. I'm glad you're okay. Let me know when you're out. It's been several months now. Ace took a plea. He got 18 months, and from what I understand through the family grapevine, because I am still not in regular contact with my parents, though we've spoken a few times, he's been, by all accounts, a model prisoner. Which is a strange sentence to type about someone I grew up with. He has a release. I'm still deciding what, if anything, I want our relationship to look like when he gets out. My mother and I have a different relationship than we've ever had. It's smaller, more careful. We talk on the phone maybe once a month, and it's not exactly warm, but it's honest in a way it never was before, and I find that I prefer honesty to warmth if I have to choose. Last month she asked me out of nowhere how I was really doing, not as a prelude, not leading somewhere, just the question, and then she waited. I told her about the promotion I'd gotten, about a trip I was planning to take in the fall, somewhere I'd wanted to go for years but kept putting off. About how I'd started cooking more, and that I'd gotten genuinely good at it, and that this felt like an unexpected and disproportionate source of joy. She listened the whole time. When I finished, she said, that sounds like a good life. It is, I said. And I meant it. The hardest thing about all of this, the thing no one tells you about drawing a line with your family, is that it doesn't feel triumphant. You don't get a moment of pure vindication. You get something quieter and stranger, which is just your own life, continuing, with a little more room in it than there was before. Room you didn't know you'd been missing, because you'd been so used to the cramped feeling that you'd started to think it was just how life felt. I used to think that the people who raised you couldn't really fail you, That there was some baseline of family loyalty that counted for something regardless of what else happened. I know now that's not true. People fail you. Parents fail you. Brothers forget your birthday and let you sit in a hospital bed alone and call in the middle of the night when they need $60,000. And you can love them anyway. I think I do, in some complicated and honest way, but love doesn't have to mean access. Love doesn't have to mean forgetting. Love can be something you hold privately, on your own terms, and offer in the forms you're willing to offer it, and that is enough. The kitchen floor where I sat on the night of that phone call is the same kitchen floor. The cabinet is the same cabinet. But the woman sitting there is different, not because of any single moment or speech or dramatic turning point, but because somewhere in the quiet of the past several months I stopped waiting for my family to see me, and started just being seen, by the people I'd chosen and by myself. That, it turns out, is the thing that was always missing. And once you find it, you don't let it go.